Let's talk about No Rest for the Wicked, a new game that has come out in early access from Moon Studios, the developers that have brought us the amazing and possibly underappreciated Ori series. I think Ori is one of the greatest games that I've played. I mean, it's so fun, fluid, addicting. They really nailed the Ori series. And if you haven't played Ori, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Ori and the Blind Forest, I think is the name of it. I forget. If you haven't played them, go play them right now. Buy them. They're probably affordable. They are fucking amazing. But we're not talking about Ori. We're talking about No Rest for the Wicked. And this is essentially a isometric, Souls-like ARPG that takes ARPG mechanics and infuses them into a Souls-like combat system with an isometric camera view. Okay, so imagine a game like Diablo or Path of Exile, and then infusing it with Souls-like combat, slow, methodical, punishing combat. But there's also random loot drops that you can collect and build your character. This, to me, is the perfect merging of games. This is why I'm so excited about Path of Exile 2. All I really want in life is a game, a Souls-like game with ARPG mechanics. Give me Miyazaki teaming up with Grinding Gear Games to create a hybrid perfect game. I mean, there's nothing more perfect than that. Imagine Dark Souls or Elden Ring with Path of Exile's loot system and loot itemization. Perfection. That would be a perfect game. Creating so many different types of builds with all different sorts of mechanics and combos. Creating this like this awesome sort of playground to mess around in. But we've just not seen that. Path of Exile 2 is looking like it's creating that, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. And I was hoping that No Rest for the Wicked was going to have some of that. Unfortunately, I just don't think No Rest for the Wicked in its current state is very good. And I'm going to talk about why. So the first portion of the game, the tutorial levels, if you will, I think are okay. And it introduces you into this game is very much a Souls-like. There's ARPG loot mechanics. However, everything about this game is Souls in nature, okay? What's really cool about this game is that it retains the Souls-like exploration. And one of the best things that I think Souls games do is allow you to explore. So there's little hidden areas everywhere that you can find loot in. And it's just really fun to have that sort of system. And what takes this even further in No Rest for the Wicked is that while the places where the loot is found, like these hidden places, after a certain amount of time, enemies can respawn there, but also the loot will change. So a chest that you might find off a cliff somewhere, if you come back to it later, it might have a different piece of, it might have a different item there. But yeah, the opening portion of the game just introduces you well enough into the game, and you get the feel for how the combat works. And it is sort of tightly confined. The areas aren't as wide open as you'd expect, like in a Souls game. You know, some of these areas are a little bit tighter, and the game does a great job of giving you combat scenarios in these tighter areas with this isometric view, but making it still feel good. Now, of course, there's going to be the dodge roll. There's fat rolls, right? If you're too heavy, then there's a slower roll. And if you're really quick, if you're really light, then you can really kind of dodge around. There's a parry mechanic. There's stance blocking, where you just hold the shield up and you can take chip damage, but you can block enemy attacks. There's stagger. There's all these sorts of like mechanics that we know from playing all these action games and Souls-like games. And they're all there. So it really does create a fun gameplay loop when you're dancing around, rolling around, putting up parries, and inflicting some heavy damage. Now, in terms of attacks, there's like a strong heavy attack, there's a quick attack, and then there's these rune attacks. And these rune attacks come from runes, right? And you can have different runes on different items, and they do different things. Like I have a rune currently where I throw out this fire hammer, and it does long range damage twice, which is really cool. And it's been really strong in a lot of areas. That's sort of where the combat, I think, is really flourishing. It's not so much that it's just Dark Souls combat, but there's this level, because there's ARPG elements, there's this level of customization. So right now I'm using a strength faith type build with this hammer, and I'm scaling elemental damage, and I'm able to kind of utilize different things. So you can infuse items with different elements, or they give you like an amethyst or a ruby, and one will give you firepower, one will give you lightning power, and you can infuse your weapon with that. You can also sort of have different runes that do different things, and different rune powers that do different elemental damages, and that's all scaled. And it tells you on the gem like how it's scaled, if it's scaled through faith or strength. And that's kind of where I'm going with it right now, just to kind of experiment with the game. So yeah, you get a lot of these different sorts of mechanics to create cool builds, and this is where the game really shines. It's finding cool items, it's fighting bosses with different sorts of combos that you've created, gearing up areas that you are particularly strong in with your build, and just kind of like grinding in that way. That's the fun part of the game. And I can't wait to do more of that. I can't wait to find cooler items and uniques and different runes that do really cool things and have really long combos that you can stretch out. It's just it's so addicting. I can't stress this enough. That gameplay loop is as addicting as we all expected it was going to be, right? When we all first heard about this type of genre merging, we knew that this was going to be an addicting experience, and it really is. But this game does fucking everything it can to make you not want to engage in this stuff. It is so frustrating, the amount of obtuse mechanics that they've placed in this game. So the biggest thing that I think hurts this game currently is that there is no Estus system. Okay, so if you're not familiar, the Estus flask system means basically when you die, you respawn at a checkpoint or a bonfire, and it refills your healing, okay? That doesn't happen in this game. The healing that you have to craft yourself. And that means you can have as much healing as you want, but that also means you can run out of healing. And if you run out of healing, you need to go and purchase healing salves or craft them yourself. So there's a lot of times, because this game is punishing, it's not easy. There's a lot of times where you're just going to be running up against an enemy and just running out of heals, and the only thing you can do is go back to town and purchase things to craft, or you're going to have to farm. You're just going to have to go around and farm the money or farm the resources to make these crafting items. That's very, very annoying, because, again, the game is punishing, and you're going to be dying dozens of times on certain enemies. Just not having that Estus system isn't the worst thing in the world. I'm partially okay with that if there wasn't also this durability system added on top of it. So if you're not aware, there's a durability system also in place. So when you die, you lose 10 durability off of your items, and most of your items are going to have around 100 to 200 durability, at least in the areas that I've seen now. That might change later on in the game and it becomes less of an issue. But currently, when you die, just imagine that you really only have like 9 or 10 deaths before your items completely break. Your items also lose durability if they're being used. And that isn't just your items, but also the tools that you use. When you couple this durability system on top of this no Estus healing system, you are constantly going to town to repair your equipment and create healing salvos. Now, this is a problem because, again, when you're dying dozens of times, you're spending all of your money. The repairing isn't cheap. It's not like a cheap cost. You're going to be spending all of your money with this repairing process, and then that's going to leave you no money to purchase heals, or very little money to purchase heals that you're going to run out of anyway, because you're going to die anyway, and you're stuck in this terrible loop. And because you can't repair at a bonfire, you have to go back to town. So there's this constant going back to town to re-up and to repair and re-up your healing stuff. And it's just so annoying because you just want to get back into the fight and just go again. I understand there's this level of tension that's created when you run out of healing or you're low on durability and you really are just so close to killing that enemy that you play really careful, and it does create like this really cool tension. But that's like 0.1% of the time. The other 99% of the time, it's just extremely tedious and unfun and frustrating to deal with. And these are the two biggest issues. Well, actually, there's another big issue. So these are the two big issues, but there's one more gigantic issue that makes this even more frustrating. And it's the fact that you have very limited inventory space. Okay, so there's only 20 slots available to you in the beginning of the game. You can unlock 5 more slots, and eventually you can unlock, I think, 5 more after that. But right now, you're only allotted 20 slots. That fills up very quickly. It's very quickly because the game encourages you to farm materials. You need building materials for your camp. You need healing materials, and there's many different types of healing materials. You need crafting materials for your gear, and they all share the same pool of inventory. They didn't split that out. So the gear that you need for crafting and the gear that you need for your camp and the gear that you need for healing and the gear that you need for elixirs all share those 20 slots, which is just outrageous. There's also this weird thing where you don't have a stash. Your stash is limited, first of all, and your stash is located in the rookery, which is like tucked away. So if you need to put something away because you just are always over encumbered, you only have so many slots to do that with. The problem that this creates is that I've probably spent 50% of my time in this game, maybe even 60% of the time, the majority of the time in this game, fiddling around in the fucking inventory and menus. Because you're constantly like, well, I need these items because I need to craft. I need these items because I'm fucking making this building project for my camp. I need these items because I want to upgrade my gear. How am I going to just fit all of these other crafting items when I just don't have the slots to do it? So you're constantly just like making compromises on what gear to throw out, what gear to sell, and what gear to keep. And I understand why that might sound like a fun mechanic, but you're just constantly just stuck in menus the whole fucking game. I just want to kill monsters. I just want to kill monsters and get loot and get crafting materials. I would love to do that. Like if there was no inventory limit, this would be so much more of a fun game. But because you're constantly just in your menus, just trying to figure out what gear is good, what gear to keep, what gear to drop, you just are, it's just so frustrating. It just feels like the game is like constantly telling you like, oh no, don't go kill monsters. Don't play the game. We actually don't want you to do that. We want you to be completely frustrated by the durability, by the inventory system, by constantly having to backtrack to different areas because there's no fast travel, okay? The fast travel system works. The last bonfire, they're called whispers, but the last bonfire that you're out, that's the only place that you can fast travel to. So say you're at an area, right now I'm at a boss right now, right? I don't think I currently need more gear and I currently want more healing to fight this enemy, okay? So that means I have to go to town. I can only go back to town, fast travel, and farm the surrounding areas near my town, which are lower level. I can't go and fast travel to a level that is a little bit higher because it's too far away and it just takes too much time. And it's just very frustrating that I can't just fast travel to the areas that I want to farm in. If I were to fast travel to those areas, then that would overwrite the bonfire, that would overwrite the boss bonfire, and I would have to manually walk there again. I'd have to manually go there again. And I don't like that system at all. It's not the worst thing. Again, all of these systems aren't the worst thing on their own, but when you combine them all together, it just becomes very, very frustrating. And there's a couple other things that I think are important to list here that I think are really bad. Performance is not very good. I have a 3070 and a 6700K or 7600K. I forget which processor. It's not the best processor, but I have a 3070. Most games run pretty well. Honestly, these days, I don't know. Well, most games feel like they're all like running like shit these days. So I'm not going to fault them too hard on that. It runs well enough to play, I will say. There have been like very, very small amount of glitches. I have fell through the earth maybe once or twice, but that's about it. I don't really want to knock it too much on that. It did just get released, so I want to give it some grace there. But I would like to see performance increased. I think the worst thing about the performance is that when it rains, that's when my performance really tanks. When it's sunny, the game is great and runs great. But when it rains, it's like, fuck, dude, this performance is like, you're losing like 20 frames just with rain in and of itself. The other thing I have an issue with is that loot acquisition is not balanced, meaning I dropped a lot of items that were just way higher level than where I was at, and you leveled up very slow in this game. So at like level 6, I dropped something that required like level 11. All of my items were like level 11, which I couldn't use until I got to the end boss. And I've also dropped some items that required like really high requirements, and I don't mind that. I think that's great. You should be able to. That's awesome. I want to drop powerful shit. However, I wasn't dropping a lot of items that were around my level. It felt like I just had like 1 or 2 items that I dropped that were near my level, and everything else was like a much higher level. So that just needs to get balanced. They need to just make it so that you're dropping more items near your level, but still allow you to drop higher end items. And then another issue that I had is with hitboxes. Some of the hitboxes are a little fucked up. Some enemies will clip you when you're clearly not getting hit. Also, there's some enemies attacks, when you roll through them, you'll get hit even though you've rolled through it. So they kind of need to tighten up some of these hitboxes. And it was really only a problem on a couple enemies that I found it particularly frustrating. There's this one enemy that does a really long like spear-like attack, and it felt like no matter where I was at, he was going to hit me. But yeah, those are a couple of the other things that I think can be cleaned up. The biggest issues, they need to figure out the healing system. They need to get rid of the durability system, or at the very least make it so your items don't degrade so quickly. It just feels like I'm constantly having to go back to town, which I don't want to do. And of course, the inventory system needs to be completely changed. Give us a stash that vendors can actually pull from, because you have to have the items on you for to purchase anything. If you have items in your stash, it's not going to recognize them. It would be fine if they made the stash infinite and allowed vendors to pull from that. That would make the inventory system not that terrible. And you don't want to be constantly in menus. It just feels like this game has been doing everything it can to not make you engage in the fun, great parts of it. So as it currently stands, I don't recommend this game right now. I think you should just wait a little bit until they fix some of this stuff. Let me go through the pain. Let a bunch of us early adopters go through the pain and figuring out how this all works, and trying to get Moon Studios to understand, like, look, no one wants to be in menus all of this time. We want to be able to just fight monsters and get cool gear. The difficulty, all of that stuff is great. It's just there's these weird annoyances and design decisions that just feel like noob design decisions. Like a noob developer would make these decisions thinking that, you know, this type of friction is beneficial. So hopefully, once they work that stuff out, then this game, we can start to recommend it. But currently as it stands, I just can't recommend it. I don't think you're going to have a good time currently in its current iteration, which is unfortunate because the gameplay loop is so fun and is so addicting. The combat and the loot system, all of that stuff is really fun, and they have a great foundation on their hands, but they got to clean up some of these stupid design decisions that they've made.